What's up, friends? Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Pam. Welcome to February, which means welcome to seed starting season. I have already started some, but official seed starting season. I'm going to be walking you through some of the things that I'm starting this season. I'm going to show you how I do it. We're going to talk about soil blocking. If you're curious, I'm going to show you how I save money on materials and I cut down on plastic by using this little system here. And I'll show you what I'm planting and give you an idea of what you can plant. We can discuss how you can figure out when is a good time for you to plant, because it can be extremely confusing. You know, you got the weeks on the back of the package, you've got what people are telling you on YouTube. So I'm going to give you a good idea and formula of how to figure out how to get a cool season garden in right before we hit those hot summer months when a lot of these crops can't grow. So what I mean by an early planting is an early spring planting is 6 to 8 weeks before your last spring frost. So first thing that you need to do is figure out what your predicted and average last spring frost is. So here in the zone 6B, I'm in New England in southern Massachusetts. I'm in sort of a warm little microclimate. We very rarely, with the exception of tonight and tomorrow, ever go below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Anyway, so generally I start to assume that I probably won't have any more hard frosts after mid-May. And sometimes I try to push it by saying like the 1st of May. So that really gives me room around like late February, early March to try to get a couple of quick growing cool veggies in. And that's also when I try to get some plant starts out for some flowers that grow quickly and do not like the summer heat. And there's actually a lot of vegetables that you can plant when it's pretty cool outside. You just have to know that the germination will probably be a little slower if the soil isn't as warm. So on that subject, I will also be putting a low tunnel out in my garden, which is a technique that I've used a few times. I've been growing here for technically like 5 years, but this is my 3rd year growing out in the big yard, so in ground, not just doing containers, which is what I did for the first couple of years. So I am very lucky to have this large garden. If you're new here, you haven't seen my garden yet. I have a good deal of space on the property that I rent that my landlords are, cool enough to let me do whatever I need to do with. So I have a lot of in-ground beds out there. I have raised beds. I've done no-dig. I've done tilling gardens. I have a native perennial garden. So I've sort of like gotten a really good education via doing out in my garden. So this system of starting seeds is pretty much what I've settled on as being the best so far. So what I do, I use something called a soil blocker, which is just this little metal contraption. These are not the super cheapest thing in the world. I think that my set cost me a little less than $50, and I have this one and a mini soil blocker. So this one also came with these little blocks that can go here in place of these little nubs. And that's actually the same size as the mini soil blocks. So you could put the minis into a larger soil block. Very satisfying. But this one is just for direct seeding into that. So that's what I'm going to be using today. And obviously the upsides of that are there's no plastic waste. You're not using, a million little cups that will break and get thrown out. And it saves you money, obviously, because you don't have to buy those things. And you also have the upside of air-pruned roots where they're not going to grow past where they hit the air. So that's air pruning, obviously. But if you've never seen it before, it's not something you would intuitively know happens. So obviously you have the upside of no plastic waste with these soil blocks and no plastic cost as well. You don't have to keep buying things. And the other upside is that it doesn't disturb the roots, and the roots are going to air prune, so you're not going to get a root bound plug that could be already stressed out, which might affect your crop later on. Love soil blocks. So I think that if you spend more than like $10 a season in planting supplies that are beyond soil, that it is probably worth the investment to get a soil blocker. But I will also be showing you all kinds of ways to start seeds that cost little to nothing on the channel, because I have not always had that, and I've also tried to start seeds in pretty much every way possible. So they all work. Seeds want to grow. that's the upside. If you're wondering what I put these soil blocks in, I actually get these little trays right here at the Dollar Tree, which I'm gonna sue if they don't change their name to the $1.25 tree because it is no longer $1. But anyway, I get these trays and they're hard plastic, so you can break them, but they're pretty sturdy. I haven't broke any so far, and a lot of them have like sat outside and they're still looking pretty good. I can wash them nice and easily. And okay, and I've got a little stack here of seeds, and I'm probably gonna pull a few more out, but I'll just show you what I have in my hand right now. These are all from Survival Garden Seeds. I just got a couple of large packages of seeds from them, and I have like a discount code with them and stuff, so I'll put that down below. And then I also have this whole box over here full of seeds, so got a lot to do. So I've got a kale mix right here. This is a butter crunch lettuce. I'm probably not gonna plant this yet, so I'm gonna put this over here. There is some mustard greens. We have some cabbage, and cabbage take quite a while, so you really gotta get them in early. Got some Swiss chard. This is some leaf lettuce, which might be able to handle in a few weeks. And then I've got some spinach, another cabbage, and some more mustard greens right here. I'm probably gonna pull some broccoli, maybe we'll try some we'll try some kohlrabi. Yeah, so we get all kinds of like delicious cold season veggies, and they're all gonna go out in my yard underneath a low tunnel, which I will also be showing you on the channel. So if it's not in this video, it will be coming right up after this one. We shall see. So what I will also do is I will leave a list of cool season crops down in the description box, so you can just like stretch that out and screenshot it or whatever, and then you can go through your seeds and see what you have. I'm trying to aim for things that are going to be ready. If they need to be ready by the time it warms up, they need to be ready in about 60 days. So anywhere from 50 to 60 day varieties. I could even push like a 70, 75 day variety. I think those will be good. Anything beyond that is probably gonna have a hard time. It's gonna get hot. And I know that cabbage, once it is well established, can handle that heat. So I definitely want to get these in on time because I've never been able to grow cabbage. So these are all going to go underneath a frost blanket and then an insect blanket as well, so that no little creepy crawlies hopefully eat my brassicas. So when you are making soil blocks, you need your soil to be so saturated that when you squeeze it, a little bit of water comes out. So we're going to check and see if mine is in that condition. I'm going to move you so you can see too. Okay, so now you've got the hand view. Hopefully you can still hear me okay. So we're gonna check this. Okay, see how there's water coming out? That's what you want. So I still may need to wet this more. We're gonna do a little test block and see how it goes. This is not my ideal seed starting medium. It is just what I have right now, and that's just gonna have to do because I'm not gonna have the fundage to get some extra stuff for another month or so. So we're making do. This is just ocean forest, so I'm gonna kind of gently, people don't usually do this. If you watch other people do it, they just try to like cram it all in, but I've just found that it's easier, especially when you're doing this on a wiggly table like I am. So just gonna flatten this out, give it a little palm pat here, and then we'll see how we do. So I always make sure I'm kind of pushing down. Bam. So, let's see if I can show you a little closer. Hopefully you can see the little indent in the top of the block here. So that's going to give you a nice little place to put your seeds, and sometimes I'll fill that up with vermiculite just to keep it moist in there. So that's what I'm going to do until I can fill up this tray. I can usually get 3 rows across and then most of a row in over here. And then to water it, you just sort of fill some water up in the bottom of the tray and let the soil blocks soak it up. You definitely do not want to overhead water on soil blocks because they will, like, you know, erode away, and then they won't be quite as strong for you. So So if you have to do a lot of these, they do sell like stand-up soil blockers too, which you kind of step on. But I'm not really farming on that scale here yet. So the reason I say this isn't my ideal mix is just because this is like a potting soil, which means there's sort of chunky things in here, some sticks and just other non-ideal stuff in here for soil blocks. But as you can see, it does work. This is a pretty forgiving process most of the time. It's more to do with moisture and just having the right pack, which you don't want to push too much. You don't want to like pack it too hard, because then sometimes it will cling to the little, I don't want to call them nipples, but that's what they look like. Little bobbles in there that make the depression in the soil block. Sometimes you'll get some soil sticking in the corners. See there? That might have been a little tight. You probably can't see that. But... So for this last little corner over here, it's not going to fit 4, so I usually just stick my hand under 3 and let the 4th one fall back in. Not a perfect process, but... And of course you can also just leave that empty. But I'm trying to maximize space a little bit here. So there you go. There's one whole tray of soil blocks. That took me like 3 minutes. And yeah, I'm just gonna make another one and then we're gonna get to planting. So you can see if you do it right, you can just pick them right up and they'll hold together. Okay, so I've got my garden marker, which is the greatest thing ever invented. This is the only thing that has ever stood up to the sun on both my winter sowing jugs and my plant tags, so love these. Well worth it. I bought this 2 years ago. It's still going. And then I've got some plant tags. So obviously you want to make sure that you tag your stuff. You can think you will remember, you will not. Okay, so first up we're going to get some cabbage started. And I want to grow 2 different colors and try to like alternate them. I think that'll be really pretty. I really would like things to be lovely in the garden as well as feed me. Another thing to be aware of, I'm just going to 1 seed each hole here because we've got time. We're gonna succession sow. We're gonna sow some more of these in 2 weeks. So if any of these fail, we'll have backups. So usually I'll put the plant name on the front and then the date that I started them on the back, and then that gives me an idea of when I'm gonna be harvesting. Then we've got some early round Dutch cabbage. So you'll see on the back, here it will say you're gonna sow that 6 to 8 weeks before your last frost date. But if I did that, it would be way too hot for the cabbage to get established. So this is why it's kind of important to not always go by what's on the back of things, because while that will work, I want my cabbage to be out under cover much earlier than that. So you can obviously sow 2 seeds per cell as well, just to make sure that you get germination, but I'm not going to actually need this many plants, so I don't need them all to come through for me, but they probably will. I've got some green kohlrabi too, so I'm going to have purple and green cabbage and kohlrabi. And once I have my low tunnel out there, and it's a few weeks later into the year, I will be able to direct sow some cool season veggies in there as well. So that will be my final succession sowing, will probably be a direct sow of things like radish and other stuff that's ready really quickly. So this is some broccoli rabe, or spring rapini. I'm gonna try and plant these. These seeds are a little bit old, so I'm gonna put quite a few of them per cell, and we'll just cut, you know, any excess off, and I'm just gonna use the rest. And then for the last row, I'm going to use some of this kale mix here. So this is just a little bit of vermiculite, and you don't have to do this, you can just use soil, but sometimes I use this to fill in the holes because it's a little bit lighter and it also holds moisture really well, so my little seedlings don't have too much trouble breaking through. Some of these little dips in the soil block can be kind of deep for, you know, like a lettuce seed or something like that. So here we go. And now something to keep in mind when you are indoor sowing cool season plants. They don't like being warm. So a lot of times people will start these, you know, brassica seedlings indoors and they won't do well because they'll get very leggy, and that's because of the heat. It's not actually because of light. A lot of times, you know, people are just assume if your seedling is leggy, it's because of light. But when it's these cool season veggies, they want to be in the cool weather. So I will probably, I'm of two minds right now. I'm either going to put a small light in my basement and put them down there, or I'm just going to try to move them out under cover as soon as possible. So we're going to see what I end up trying. It will depend on the weather. It is going back to a pretty mild winter right after these deep freezes, so we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I'm not sure. Either way, but if you have your seed set up in the basement, especially if you have LED light, which doesn't get warm, you can definitely do this indoors. But seedlings can go outside. Once they get going, you'd be surprised. So I also mentioned flowers, so that's what we're gonna do next, and I'm actually gonna do those a little differently because I would like to start some flower seeds that need a little bit of cold stratification. I wanna plant some milkweed seedlings. So what we're gonna do is a technique called winter sowing, and I'm gonna use some empty milk jugs, but these are from water, but you know, those little plastic jugs. So I'm gonna show you how to do that now. Okay, so I'm gonna give you a quick overview of the winter sowing method. I also have a full video on it up here if you're curious, and there should be, I believe that one has like the results and everything in it. But this is all you need. So this is gonna act like a little greenhouse, and it's also gonna expose these seeds that we're gonna plant to very cold weather, and that's because a lot of these seeds need something called cold stratification in order for them to germinate. And the reason is because if they were to just drop their seeds in the fall and, you know, be exposed to those warmer days, and then they would germinate and then they would be killed off once the winter weather comes. These are, you know, programmed in their little seed brains. They don't have brains, but you know what I mean. So basically these seeds have evolved to need that period of cold before the warm up of spring, those nice warm wet days, for them to germinate. So that is the principle that we use for the winter sowing method. So basically what you need to do is poke some holes in the bottom of one of these containers, and you want to get a good amount of holes under there because you want the rain to be able to come right through. You're going to get rid of the lid because we need rain to be able to come through. I put a few holes up on the top here, but you don't have to do that. And then we're gonna cut around the jug from the bottom of the handle all the way around. And you're gonna make like an opening top to the jug. And then we're gonna tape that together, back together. We're gonna write what we have inside of it. We're gonna leave it outside to the weather and elements. And that's it. So if you've never heard of this or winter sowed before, I highly recommend you know, look up, you can watch my video. There's a ton of videos on YouTube where you can see people winter sowing all kinds of stuff. So if you want to start your winter sowing, you know, in April, you can do it with like tomatoes and things like that because you're going to have the extra warmth from your little greenhouse. But usually what people use this for is for those seeds that need the period of cold. So this is a great way to grow your own perennials. They are very expensive at the store, especially now. Everything is incredibly expensive. So doing this is going to save you a lot of money too. I have actually grown a good chunk of the perennials out in my yard, the ones that are not from bulbs, from seed. So you can just use a utility knife for this. I happen to have an X-Acto on me, so we're gonna use that. Okay, so that was a terrible cutting job, but you'll get the idea. So there you go. So we're gonna put our soil in the bottom of this, and you're gonna fill it up a good ways like that. You want them to have some nice room to grow in the spring. And then as the weather heats up, you can start to, you know, open the top and just let them grow. But highly recommend doing this, especially if you don't have grow lights and all this stuff. This is almost free, you know, so you can grow things. Okay, so obviously you want to use pre-moistened soil. It just makes things easier. You don't want to be watering over the top of this. You're going to spread the seeds out everywhere and mess your stuff all up. So these should stay pretty watered while they're outside. If you live in a particularly dry place, you may need to water things, but you can just set them into some water and bottom water. That is probably the best way to do it, in my opinion. I've never had to water mine though, so. I've had some stuff not come up, but for the most part, I've had probably about 80% success rate with this so far. So these are some common milkweed seeds that I saved last year from the plants that I had out in my yard. And I want to be able to have a more controlled milkweed patch this year because it's kind of in the wild side of my yard where I don't like to go very often. So I'm going to try to plant some that are more accessible, and hopefully I will be able to raise butterflies in a more wild and natural habitat this year by kind of, I'm gonna have a little screened in area at some point, I hope, to put plants in and out of, just to protect the caterpillars. Probably take a little bit more of a hands-off approach this year, but we'll see. So I'm just we're gonna overseed a little bit because these are actually pretty easy to pull apart once they get going. Okay, so ideally you want to get some UV resistant duct tape to go around here. I still have to go to the store and grab that, so I've temporarily used some packing tape to close it, but just do your best to close it up as good as you can. I recommend taping all the way around so that slugs and things like that cannot get in through here. Some people will use like a mesh or a tool over the top, so if you have problems with slugs, feel free to do that. I've never really had an issue with it. So I usually don't bother, but that's just something you can do if you need to. So I've written on the thing, you want to make sure you have a UV resistant marker, and you also want to maybe keep a written record of what you've put where, because this marker will be fine because this is a garden marker, but pretty much any other marker I can guarantee you is going to fade off of your bottle before the springtime. So. And you can get this started as early as like Christmas, so I'm actually pretty late doing this, but we'll see how it goes. Next up, I'm going to be sowing some sweet cicely. This is from Strictly Medicinal Seeds. This is a licorice flavored and scented plant. The whole thing is edible. And medicinally, it's used for lung problems, asthma, things like that. So that's exciting for me and my asthmatic lungs. This is an aggressive self-seeder, but it is not considered invasive by the University of Cornell. So, or Cornell University, I guess. So that's good. So look at these seeds. These are wild. So I've never grown this before, but it appeals to me because it is part shade tolerant and it will like some moist soils. So I can kind of stick it over where I've been putting these sorts of perennials that, you know, I want to cut back before they reseed like crazy, but... I'm just going to put part shade on here so I remember that when I go to plant this. Okay. And then to finish off today's seed starting mission here, look, this pot is already breaking. Look at that. See, this is why I like soil blocks. Look at that cheap piece of shite. So I got these for my seed sale. So obviously I'm going to have to be careful with these because they're already falling apart, which sucks. But yeah, these are supposed to be for the seed sale. If you guys watched my video where I showed you what I wanted to buy for seeds this year, I briefly mentioned a seed company called Renaissance Garden Farms or Renaissance Farms or something like that. And that's where I got my bonsai micro dwarf tomatoes from before, but it seems like they've kind of like disappeared, potentially without allegedly filling all their orders, so don't go there. So I did manage to find one other place that had these on Etsy. So this is obviously just comes from a small seed saver, so hopefully they look right, they look tiny, they look like my other ones, so hopefully this is the same plant. And I'm getting them started extremely early February, unheard of, but I'm going to try to grow them in the greenhouse or under cover or potentially indoors. I just want to get some super early cherry tomatoes going, and we're going to see if I can get these to work out, because they do stay very, very small. So even if I have to pot them up, they stay really small. So this is just for me. All right, so let me just show you what I got growing, and then we'll say goodbye for this video. Okay, so you can see I've got a couple of flats going here. So these are actually my slow growing herbs, with the exception of the dill. You can see it's not very slow growing at all, but I'm going to have that go out pretty early because, again, that's a cool season herb. So those will be probably potted up and moved outside at some point. But these are actually all pansies and violas. So those will be able to go out nice and early under cover. These will be some spring flowers. I have my super hot peppers. I have the first tray of them going now. And I'm actually going to start some more in a couple of weeks. And I'm just going to see, I'm trying to find the sweet spot for my really slow growing super hot peppers. And the last time that I planted them in February, they were actually a little too late to finish at the end of the season. So we're going to see if starting them super early helps. And then, of course, I've got some nice early onions, some onions down there as well. And those are going to go out under cover. And those will be like my first succession of onions. And in this tray, this is all those slower growing herbs, some perennial herbs. We've got oregano, thyme and chives, lavender, rosemary, things like that. And then I've got some celery going and some dill, like I said. So now some of those things probably a little too early to end up being my main garden plants, but they're going to be some things that I can pick off of. And of course the perennials grow pretty slowly. So those I'm just going to pot up, and a lot of those will probably get sold at my seed sale. And then we've got what we sowed today together. Back there in the soil mini blocks, you can see those back there. Those are actually begonias that I try to grow for my mom every year. They're extremely difficult to grow and they take friggin' forever. So we'll see if they actually make it. I can't even get in there to show you that they've already germinated, but it is like the head of a pin, just so tiny. I've got some more onions in there, and that's what I've got going for seeds right now. So it's not a lot of stuff. Because a lot of this is going to get moved out early into the greenhouse or under cover, and we are going to push the limits on cool transplanting. And of course everything is surrounded by the house plants, which will eventually have to move because this will become all baby plants eventually.